Well, good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. I think this is my first time in Delaware, so I've gotten to see a little bit of the countryside driving here from Baltimore. I do work for Answers in Genesis. We're located in northern Kentucky in the Cincinnati area, and there we have built the Creation Museum. How many of you have made the trip to the Creation Museum? Okay, the rest of you need to repent in sackcloth and ashes. I really encourage you to come. I'll tell you more about that in the worship service. We've also last year opened the Ark Encounter about 45 minutes from the museum, and I'll tell you more about that. But this morning we're going to talk about dinosaurs. Have you and your kids been brainwashed? Dinosaurs are really popular in our culture today. We've got a lot of dinosaur toys, dinosaur books, actually quite a few dinosaur books, actually a really large number of dinosaur books. And that's not all the dinosaur books. But all those books have two things in common. They teach kids about dinosaurs, and they teach them about evolution in millions of years. And parents buy these books or get them out from the library, and most parents don't know what to do with evolution in millions of years, so they read to the kids about the dinosaurs, and in the process, the kids are getting indoctrinated in evolutionary thinking. But it's not just the kids, the adults too. National Geographic, Dinosaurs Take Wing, The Origin of Birds. Most evolutionists believe that the way that we got birds was that dinosaurs evolved into birds. The next year, Feathers for T-Rex, National Geographic. We'll look at that in a moment. But whenever we're out speaking, and I've had the privilege of speaking in 25 countries, the question very soon after the topic of creation comes up, the question comes up, well, how do you fit dinosaurs into the Bible? And when a person asks that question, what they're really asking is, how do you fit the fact that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago? They all went extinct 65 million years before man. They were these vicious meat-eating creatures that ripped other creatures apart. How do you fit that into the Bible? And the answer is really easy. You don't. You don't fit the evolutionary interpretation of the fossil evidence for dinosaurs into the Bible. Instead, what we need to do is we need to start our thinking with the Bible and use that truth to help us understand dinosaurs. And so that's what we're going to do, but I want to begin by showing you what the evolutionists believe about dinosaurs. Here's a chart from Encyclopedia Britannica, which is not a Christian publication. And you'll see that they say that the first dinosaurs evolved into existence about 245 million years ago. They were rather small, but they evolved into the really big ones. And then they all went extinct about 65 million years ago. This is another chart from that encyclopedia. And they show you that crocodiles and alligators and all the different kinds of dinosaurs are related to a common ancestor, an archosaur. And then they show you that the dinosaurs evolved into birds. And in this particular view, Archaeopteryx is the transitional form, part bird, part reptile. But there are evolutionists who would say that Archaeopteryx was 100% bird. And the further problem with this is that there are actually 100% birds found deeper in the fossil record than Archaeopteryx. And I've noticed in my reading and museums and different things that evolutionists don't spend very much time talking about where dinosaurs came from. They seem to be more interested in what happened to them and particularly how they evolved into birds. And a few years ago, I was speaking in Bozeman, Montana, and during a Sunday afternoon free time, my host took me to the Montana State Museum of the Rockies, which is arguably one of the greatest dinosaur museums in the country, if not in the world. Just an amazing collection of dinosaur fossils. And so as I was going through the museum, every fossil had a label under it that said something about millions of years. And just as I was leaving the exhibit area to go back out into the lobby, I came to this TV, and it was showing a movie of birds taking off, landing, flapping their wings, preening themselves, splashing in the water. And above that TV screen was a sign, and you can barely see it. I'll show you what it said. Birds are living dinosaurs. Well, I've got news for you, folks. Birds are birds. That's playing language games. Richard Lewontin is a leading evolutionist, and he has a chart showing a comparison of reptiles with birds. And he says this: evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solve the problem of flight. And now think about that sentence. It's always good when you read claims by evolutionists to read the sentence slowly. So let's do that. Evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solve the problem of flight. Well, if they were already birds, they already knew how to fly. And if they didn't know how to fly, they didn't figure it out. Because if it was that easy, Orville and Wilbur Wright wouldn't have had to do all those experiments. They should have said by which reptiles solved the problem of flight, but that would have been even more ridiculous. But when we compare things, he wants us to see that there is a similarity, but reptiles have solid bones like we have. Generally, they have marrow in them. Birds have hollow bones. Most of their bones have a crisscrossing structure, which makes them very light for flight and strong. Their forelimbs are similar. They have the same bones, but they're noticeably different. And the forelimbs of the supposed reptile that evolved into the bird are just these short little things. A bird, of course, has very long wings. Their sternums are similar, but significantly different, and their skin covering is different. Reptiles have scales, birds have feathers. Now, when you're just looking at feathers and scales with your naked eye, you can see there's a huge difference. But when you look at it under the microscope, it's a little more difficult. And so this is a reptile scale, and it's like overlapping plates. They're actually folds of skin. Now I'm going to show you a bird feather magnified by the same power several thousand times under the microscope, and I will admit that they do look very similar under magnification, but you can tell the difference if you look carefully. So this is reptile scale, that's bird feathers. Just about exactly the same, isn't it? And if we crank up the power, it's even more different, because that little structure there is on a hinge, and it swings over on that other structure. And so when you pull down a feather, it pulls it apart. When you go up the feather, it zips things together again. Scales did not evolve into feathers by just being frayed on the edges. There's another difference. Reptiles have a two-way lung system, and they have a diaphragm. So the air goes into the lungs, and then through the movement of the diaphragm, the air goes back out the lungs. But a bird has a one-way system with no diaphragm. So the air is continuously flowing through the lung, out a different place, through some air sacs in the body, through some hollow bones, and then back out the body. So that allows for a continuous flow of air through the lung, which makes flight possible. Think about that. How do you change a two-way breathing system into a one-way system and still have the creature survive? I mean, you can only miss a few breaths, and then it's over. Well, the evolutionists have proposed a couple of theories for the origin of flight. One is the ground-to-air theory. The idea here is that a reptile was running along trying to catch some food. His arms were kind of flabby, flapping in the wind. His scales got frayed on the edges, and he took off. Of course, do you realize how long he would have had to run? I mean, he would have starved to death. So that's not a good idea, and that's been discarded. The dominant view is the air-to-ground theory. The idea here is that a reptile was up in a tree, and he thought to himself, you know, I'd like to get from this branch on this tree over to that branch on that tree. There's got to be a lot faster way to do this than to crawl all the way down this tree, across the ground, and up the other tree. And so he just jumped. Of course, the first experiment would have been a disaster. Because if he survived, he would have thought, you know, that was really dumb. I'm not doing that again. And if he didn't survive, his son would have thought, Dad was really stupid. I'm not doing that. But the evolutionists want us to believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. November 1999, National Geographic, feathers for T-Rex, new bird-like fossils are missing links in dinosaur evolution. And look at that baby T-Rex. You see the down feathers on that baby T-Rex? Please note, that's a painting. That's not a photograph. That's a painting by an evolutionary artist using evolutionary imagination. Well, you open up the article, and they have a picture of the fossil, and or actually a reconstruction of what the fossil bones looked like when it had feathers. And they said, we can now say that birds are theropods just as confidently as we say that humans are mammals. Well, what's a theropod? Well, they don't tell you or show you, so I will show you. That's a theropod. It's the dinosaurs with the big back legs and the short front legs, which even today, scientists don't know exactly what they did with those short arms. But once you see that, which National Geographic didn't show the readers, you see there's a problem, because that thing has short arms and the bird has really long arms. But they said, we're just as confident that birds are theropods as that humans are mammals. Well, are humans mammals? Yes. We have hair, we give birth to live young, we feed our young milk. We're mammals. We're more than mammals, but we're in the mammal category. We're not in the reptile or the bird category. So they said, we're just as confident that birds are theropods. Well, they said that in November of 1999. But in March of 2000, National Geographic published a little letter to the editor by a Chinese paleontologist who in so many words said, I hate to inform you of this, but the fossil on which you based that article was a fraud. It was the parts of a dinosaur or a reptile fossil and the parts of a bird fossil very cleverly glued together by Chinese farmers. Well, National Geographic had egg on their face, so they commissioned an independent investigator who wrote an article in October of 2000, stuck in the back of the magazine, no beautiful full-color pictures, just a few large font statements. I wonder how many people read the October article who read the 1999 article, because most people know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, that was 2000. In 2003, Discover magazine interviewed Dr. Alan Fiducia. Dr. Fiducia is a world expert on birds at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He is an evolutionist, but he doesn't believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. He believes some other reptile did. But Discover magazine asked him, well, what about all the other evidence for feathered dinosaurs besides the one in National Geographic? Dr. Fiducia, when we see actual feathers preserved on specimens, we need to carefully determine if we are looking at secondarily flightless birds that have retained feathers and only superficially resemble dinosaurs, or if the specimens are in fact related to dinosaurs. That's a difficult issue to deal with right now, given the existence of fake fossils. Oh, that's an interesting statement. So far, only one feathered dinosaur, Archaeoraptor, the one in National Geographic, has been publicly acknowledged as a forgery. You think there are others? Dr. Fiducia, Archaeoraptor is just the tip of the iceberg. There are scores of fake fossils out there, and they have cast a dark shadow over the whole field. When you go to these fossil shows, it's difficult to tell which ones are faked and which ones are not. I have heard that there's a fake fossil factory in northeastern China, in Liaoning province, near the deposits where many of these recent alleged feathered dinosaurs were found, including the one that was in National Geographic, which they paid $80,000 for at a trade show in Utah. I don't think the Chinese farmers got all that money. But if you're a poor farmer, this is a good way to make money. Well, referring to the Archaeoraptor fraud in National Geographic, another paleontologist said, at the moment, I don't trust any of these specimens until I see the x-rays. The whole commercial art market for fossils has gotten riddled with fakery. Well, in 2003, Dr. Fiducia was commenting in that Discover article and further said, journals like Nature don't require specimens to be authenticated, and the specimens immediately end up back in China so nobody can examine them. They may be miraculous discoveries, they may be missing links as they are claimed, but there is no way to authenticate any of this stuff unless you have a lot of money and you can fly to China and be guaranteed that the Chinese authorities will let you actually see the bones. But we still get reports coming out of China that they have found more evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds. But the problem of fake fossils in China is serious and growing. Rather than being excavated by paleontologists on fossil digs, most of the region's fossils are pulled from the ground by desperately poor farmers and then sold on to dealers and museums. So we have no reason whatsoever to trust what's coming out of China. Well, to change a reptile into a bird, you've got to do more than just change scales into feathers. You got to change the breathing system, the skeletal system, the digestive and nervous system, construct bills and beaks, master the art of nest building. Now, we do have evidence that dinosaurs laid eggs in nests because we found clutches of eggs together in the fossil record, but they didn't make nests in trees. That's an additional skill. They have to learn to fly and navigate, and there are birds that spend the summer in Greenland, and before it gets too cold, they fly nonstop to the south tip of South America. There are other birds that spend the summer in Alaska and make a nonstop trip to Hawaii, losing 60% of their body weight in the process. Scientists don't know for sure how they navigate, but they do. They have to develop sound-producing organs and learn songs, and each bird species has a different song. And then you've got to shrink the dinosaur to make the first bird, and then you've got to shrink the first bird to make all the other birds. So here's the evidence that this happened. In one of our leading science magazines. Now, if you believe that there was a steady shrinkage of dinosaurs towards a bird over 50 million years, then you must believe in green men on Mars and that the moon is made out of cheese. Nothing goes steadily the same direction for 50 million years because the millions of years never existed. So I submit to you that the idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds is just impossible, really, any kind of reptile. But in a dinosaur encyclopedia that I have in my office, produced in conjunction with the British Museum of Natural History, they have a chart of dinosaur history, and they show you that the crocodiles, the flying reptiles, pterosaurs, birds, and the different kinds of dinosaurs are all related to a common ancestor, an archosaur, down there at the bottom. But you notice that there are two colors of lines, gray and yellow. In my book, it's black and outline. Well, what do those mean? Well, the fruits that you need sharp teeth to cut into. I mean, it's tough to cut a tomato with a dull knife. So those sharp teeth would have been very useful for eating plant material. You can go on YouTube and watch an alligator eat a watermelon. And research recently has reported that 3/4 of all crocodilian species, crocodiles and alligators, eat fruit frequently and intentionally. Yes, but sharp teeth are proof that the creature ate meat, people say. No, sharp teeth are proof the creature had sharp teeth. That's all we can say. Because here are the jaws of 6 species of bats. One of those bats, only one of those bats, eats small mammals. The jaws of one of those bats eats only blood. One eats only fruit. One eats insect. One jaws go to the bat that eats nectar and pollen. So which teeth go with the bat that eats small mammals? Well, if we never saw any of these bats alive, we'd probably think they all ate meat. But it's only B. And here you have 2 skulls that are remarkably similar. Very sharp canine teeth, good chomping molars. The top one is a fruit bat that eats only fruit. The bottom one is a wolf that eats meat. Squirrels have very sharp teeth and sharp claws, but they're almost completely vegetarian. And in a sign at a bear exhibit in Sydney, Australia, we read, although bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet consists mainly of plants. Well, think about that for a second. If their diet consists mainly of plants, why don't we say they have teeth designed to eat plants? That's what they eat most of the time. And there's one bear that has very sharp teeth and sharp claws, and it's strictly vegetarian, and that's the panda bear. And it needs those sharp teeth and claws to eat that tough bamboo. So on day 6, all the animals and the people were vegetarian. Well, if dinosaurs existed with man on day 6, why don't I find the word dinosaur in the Bible? Well, that's easy. The reason it's not in the King James Bible is because it was translated in 1611. But the word dinosaur was not invented until 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, great British scientist. It means terrible lizard. So the Bible, the King James, was translated 230 years before the word was invented. So that's why it's not in the Bible. Well, why isn't it in our modern translations? Oh, well, that's because they've all been translated after 1859 when Charles Darwin did his famous theory. And our Bible scholars have been more or less influenced by evolutionary millions of years thinking. And so they don't see what we can see in the Bible. There's a Hebrew word in the Old Testament, tanin. It's used many times. And the Bible does not classify creatures the same way modern scientists do. Modern scientific classifications were developed by Linnaeus, the Swedish scientist, and you can categorize creatures in lots of different ways. So the Bible doesn't classify in the same way. But dinosaurs, technically speaking, are land animals. And so in the Bible, the word tanin is used to refer to sea creatures and land animals. In the King James, it's usually translated with the word dragon. And there are a number of interesting statements. There is also another passage that doesn't use that word. And we have time to discuss that this morning, and that's in Job chapter 40. Now, in the book of Job, Job had suffered a lot of loss. He'd lost his health, he'd lost his kids, he'd lost his livestock. And he was trying to figure out why he was suffering all these terrible things, and his friends were trying to help him. And God listened to them for 37 chapters, and then in chapter 38, God said, okay, now I'm gonna talk. And he started asking Job questions about creation. And he says, do you know about the horse, lion, eagle, deer, mountain goat, donkey, ox, ostrich, and locust? And in each time God asked him a question, he said, now look at this. Now look at this. So he's obviously talking about creatures that Job saw. And we come to Job chapter 40, and he says, now look at the behemoth. which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. So whatever creature he's talking about, it must be another creature that Job saw, who is a vegetarian, who has very strong stomach muscles, and his bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. So he's got really strong bones, and he's evidently the greatest land animal that God made. Chapter 41, God talks about Leviathan, which is evidently the greatest sea creature God made. Well, what creature was this? Well, I left out one verse that's really helpful. That's verse 17. It says, his tail sways like a cedar. Now, if you read the marginal notes of most study Bibles today, you'll see something like the NIV study Bible has, possibly the hippopotamus or the elephant. But whoever wrote that note either wasn't paying attention to verse 17 or hasn't been to the zoo lately. Because that is the cedar of Lebanon, one of the biggest trees in the Middle East. And when that thing moves in a strong wind, it doesn't go like that. Now, kids, you're going to have to help here because your parents won't know the answer to this next question. But have you ever seen a tail like that? Well, you haven't. But have you ever seen an elephant with a tail like that? No. Have you ever seen a hippo with a tail like that? No. But there are creatures that had tails like that. They're called sauropods, long-necked dinosaurs. Just in case you haven't been to the zoo lately, that is an elephant tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And that is a hippo tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And when it goes like that, you would be really wise to be standing some distance away because there will be something else moving from that same location. So on day 6, we had dinosaurs, we had hippos and elephants, even though none of them are specifically mentioned in Genesis 1, they're land animals. Well, we have hippos and elephants, but we evidently don't have any dinosaurs. So what happened? Well, we go back to the Bible. The Bible says that God created a perfect world. Man sinned, and that brought death and disease and suffering into the world. We'll unpack that some more in the next session. But the evolutionists say exactly the opposite. They say that death has always been a part of the biology, and it's a long process of millions of years of death and bloodshed and disease and extinction that led to man's existence. But in Genesis 3, God said to the serpent who deceived Eve, because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. So God, after Adam sinned, God cursed the animals. And we read in Romans chapter 8, we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. See, Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma didn't happen before sin. They happened after sin. We live in a world that's not like the Genesis 1 very good creation. And so we don't know if it happened instantly or gradually. We don't know exactly how God accomplished this, but very likely all he had to do was flip some genetic switches in the DNA code to change herbivores into carnivores. So they had all the hardware. All they had to do was switch some switches to change the behavior. And after the fall, animals started to have disease. And in dinosaurs, we find evidence in the fossils of brain tumors, cancer, arthritis, and broken bones. And the world became very, very evil. So evil, the Bible said, that the thoughts and intentions of the human heart were only evil continually. And so God said, I'm going to destroy the world. And he found one righteous man, Noah. And he said, Noah, I want you to take your 3 sons and your wives and 2 of every kind of land, animal, and bird that I will bring to you into the ark. And so he took 2 of every kind of land, animal, and bird. Not 2 of every species, as our evolutionist critics claim, but 2 of every kind. We'll talk about the difference between species and kind tonight. So I hope you will come back, because that's a very, very important distinction. And so he would have taken 2 of every kind of dinosaur onto the ark, along with every other kind of land animal and bird. But as soon as we talk about dinosaurs in the ark, people scoff. Non-Christians scoff, but even some Christians scoff. And they say, well, there's no way, excuse me, that you could fit those dinosaurs in that ark. Well, you couldn't fit that dinosaur in that ark, but that wasn't the ark. This is closer to what the ark looked like. It was 1.5 football fields long, about a half a football field wide, and 4 stories tall. And that's the way we've designed it at our Ark Encounter, with a wind catcher on one end and a keel on the other, as a result of studying the design of a lot of ancient ships. Yes, but you still couldn't fit all the animals in the ark. Well, we need to know some truths about dinosaurs. The first is that not all dinosaurs were large. Some were no bigger than a chicken at full maturity. The average size is about the size of a large cow. But we needed to know another fact, and that is that all the dinosaurs started out small. The smallest dinosaur egg that we've ever found is only a little bit bigger than an American football, but here you have a little itty-bitty alligator, and you can stick your finger in his mouth, and that'll just tickle your fingers. But he'll grow into a really, really big alligator, and you don't want to stick anything in that mouth. Alligators, like all reptiles, never stop growing. And so the largest dinosaur eggs are only a little bigger than an American football. We also know that God told Noah to take 2 of every kind onto the ark. And we know something about the large dinosaurs, the long-necked sauropods. Scientists have studied the growth patterns in their bones compared to the growth patterns of other creatures, and they've discovered that those large dinosaurs grew very little the first few years of their life. Most of their growth was in a short period, and then they didn't grow very much after that. So if Noah took the animals onto the ark when they were young, they wouldn't be very big, and they wouldn't grow very much in that 1 year. Most of their growth would be after the flood. And then you say, yeah, but now you're trying to make it easy for Noah. No, think about it. First of all, God, if you read the text carefully, Noah went into the ark and God brought the animals to the ark. And the purpose of taking them on the ark, Genesis 7:3 says, was to keep offspring alive on the face of all the earth. So God is not going to bring a big T-Rex, a big Apatosaurus to the ark, because that's going to be grandma and grandpa. They don't have any reproductive potential after the flood. He's going to bring junior T-Rex, junior Apatosaurus. They're going to be a lot smaller. And then we've got to realize that evolutionists have multiplied the number of genre and species of dinosaurs. Almost every new fossil discovery gets a new species name. And there's 2 problems here. One is, noted by evolutionists, one is that when a scientist in China finds some fossil bones, they usually don't find the whole dinosaur. They find a few bones. They give it a certain scientific name, genus and species name. And then a scientist over in the United States finds some dinosaur bones, might be different bones. He gives it a different genus and species name. And years later, after those names are established, they find out, well, actually, those are the same kind of dinosaur. 2 evolutionists commenting on this wrote an article recently saying that probably 30 to 35% of all dinosaur species never existed because they're duplicate names or different names for what is the same creature. The other thing is that dinosaurs, like many other creatures, including human beings, they change morphologically in their physical appearance as they grow. So when a baby is born, every baby in the hospital is gorgeous. And then as we grow, most of us become average, and then there are a few people who stay gorgeous or handsome, right? Did you know that your nose and your ears never stop growing? So you can look in the mirror today and do a little mental imagination of what your ears and nose are going to look like when you're 80 or 90. Okay? Dogs. We have a black lab. She has had 2 litters, and those puppies coming out, they're just so beautiful. Little smashed nose. And by 10 weeks, when we turn them over to somebody new, they've got an elongated snout. Well, dinosaurs do the same thing. And so what's happened is evolutionists have found small specimens of a particular kind of dinosaur and given it a different species or genus name than another one that is a grandpa of the same dinosaur. So here you have two skulls of 2 different dinosaurs. The first name is the genus name. The second name is the species name. So they're not only different species, they're in a different genus. But there's less variation between those skulls than there is between those 3 dog skulls. And those 3 dogs are all the same species. Canis familiaris, the domestic dog. So Noah didn't have to take two of each of those ceratops on the ark. He just took 2 ceratops. The variation there is either the result of genetic variation built into the DNA, or the age of the dinosaur, or mutations. He just took 2 ceratops. And he didn't take any of those dogs on the ark. We know because those dogs are all the result of artificial breeding by humans over the last 300 to 400 years. He just took 2 of the dog kind on the ark. So we think from research that there are probably only 50 to 80 kinds of dinosaurs on the ark. All of them small when they were young, some small at full maturity. And anything not in the ark perished. Creatures which could run to higher ground would, but eventually there wouldn't be any higher ground as the floodwaters covered the whole earth. And so we would expect to find from this global flood billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth, and that's what we find. We find dinosaur fossils on every continent, and their bones are buried in rock layers that were once soft sediments laid down by water. We occasionally find fossilized skin, which speaks very strongly of rapid burial and fossilization. I don't know if you have this in the state of Delaware, but over in Kentucky, we have deer hunting all year round. There are a couple weeks a year where you can hunt with a bow or a gun, and then the rest of the time, Kentuckians hunt with their car. And it's really weird. When they hunt with their gun or the bow, I notice they take the deer home and they process it and fill the freezer. When they hunt with a car, they leave the thing on the side of the road. Of course, you know what happens. Within a matter of months, that thing is turned into a fossil. So we have fossil deer all over the state of Kentucky. No. If the highway department doesn't come to pick up those creatures, nature will take care of it. Scavengers will come and eat it, microorganisms, the rain, the ice, it'll dissolve everything. To make a fossil, you've got to bury that creature and cut it off from decay processes. Here's a T-Rex. This is not uncommon. To find them in what evolutionists say is in the throes of death in water with the head thrown back. Yeah, but if dinosaurs and people live together, why don't we find humans buried with dinosaurs? Well, for starters, I would not expect a human and a dinosaur to be running next to each other trying to escape the floodwaters. But we don't find humans buried down there with dinosaurs. And we evidently don't have living dinosaurs today. At least that's what we're told, although there's some very tantalizing testimony from Papua New Guinea and Central Africa and other places that they might still be living in some of the really dense jungles. So according to the evolutionists, we have 65 million years of rock layers where there's no dinosaurs, fossils, and there's no human fossils. So that's proof positive that humans and dinosaurs never lived together. No, it's not. The coelacanth was a fish known from the fossil record to have gone extinct, according to the evolutionists, with the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Above the 65 million year mark, no coelacanth fossils. So it's gone extinct. They said that until 1938, when they found the coelacanth swimming off the coast of Madagascar in 400 feet of water. And when they compared the living coelacanth with the fossil, it was virtually identical. Now, we don't find coelacanths in the fossil record with humans, but that's not surprising because humans don't live at 400 feet below sea level. Well, they said there were no fossils in those rocks for 65 million years, but then more recently they said, well, oops, we made a mistake. We've actually found them in rocks that we date to be 17 million years. But those dates are completely unreliable, and hope you come back to hear some more tomorrow night. So the fact that they aren't buried together doesn't mean they didn't live at the same time. It just means they weren't buried together, or at least that we haven't found them. Well, why did they become extinct if they did? Well, there's several possible causes. Man might have overhunted them after the flood. Man destroyed their habitat, brought disease into their population, rapid climate changes in the post-flood world. There could be a number of reasons why they went extinct, just like other creatures go extinct for a lot of the same reasons. But they might not be extinct, because remember, the coelacanth. Well, when did they become extinct? If they did, let's suppose they did for a second. Well, Mary Schweitzer was a graduate student at Montana State University, and she and her lab assistant were studying some T-Rex bones under the microscope, and the lab assistant said, Mary, you've got to look at this. I think I see red blood cells in this T-Rex bone. And she went over and looked at it, and she said, it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone, but of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Yeah, that was a big question, because blood cells break down very rapidly. And notice, she couldn't believe it. Why? Because she could not question the 65 million years. Well, that was 1993. She has since become quite an expert on this. She's found other dinosaur bones with soft tissue, and in 2005, Discovery Channel interviewed her about this, and she had this to say about another discovery.
Not going to believe this. When she picked up a small piece to stop the reaction by putting it in water, it stretched, and it sproinged, and it moved all over the place. So we knew we had something pretty unusual.
It appears to be soft tissue. When they look at neighboring parts of the bone, they're even more surprised.
Out popped the blood vessels, and they were pretty incredible. And I said, I don't believe it. That's not possible. We need to do it again and again. It's one of those just goosebump-inducing scientific moments. That's all I can say. And they don't really happen very often.
Blood vessels should not exist in fossilized bone. Many scientists believe organic molecules can't last more than 100,000 years. Yet Schweitzer's bone is 68 million years old.
I think the presence of soft tissues and cells indicates there's a process going on that we didn't have a clue about. So I think it means that we have to kind of rethink the whole chemical process of making a bone turn into a fossil.
Why don't we rethink the whole dating method that comes up with 65 million years? Well, the Creation Research Society is a society of about 700 scientists with master's or PhD who are young Earth creationists. And they've been doing research on dinosaur bones and finding soft tissue and other things that shouldn't be there if those bones are really that old. And you can read about their research on their website, or they've just come out with a new book that kind of summarizes that research and critiques the various explanations that evolutionists have been coming up with to explain how you could have 65 million year old bones with soft tissue and blood cells, etc. Creationists have also done carbon dating on dinosaur bones. And they've gotten ages in the 20s and 30s of thousands of carbon years. That's not the age of the bones. That's just what you get when you use the carbon dating. But there should not be any carbon-14 in those bones if they're millions of years old. And so this is very powerful evidence, but it's being ignored and rejected and censored by evolutionists. Almost every culture of the world has dragon legends. The Chinese are the most famous, of course. The flag of Wales has a dragon on it. And there is a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears striking resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus with a long tail and neck and small head. And here's the etching on stone and a person bringing out the relief. Now, these were done by Native American Indians, supposedly. They also have carvings of other animals that we know today. So we have to ask the question, well, how in the world did they sculpture that image if they'd never seen the creature? Because we don't have any creatures today that look like those. Then there's a very famous temple in the jungles of Cambodia from the 12th century after Jesus Christ. And carved into the stone archway of one of the entrances is a whole bunch of creatures, all well known to us, including a Stegosaurus. But how did the Cambodian artists carve that if they never saw the creature? The first dinosaur bones were supposedly discovered, according to all that we know, in the early decades of the 1800s. And when they first found them, they didn't know what in the world they were. They just found a few bones. So it's not an easy thing to reconstruct what the creature looks like from the fossils. Excuse me. Then there's the tomb of Bishop Bell. Anglican bishop, died in 1496. He's buried in the floor of Carlisle Cathedral in England. And in a brass band around the lid in the floor, there's carvings of a bat, a dog, a fish, a bird, an eel, a wild pig, and a fox, and what looks like two long-necked dinosaurs. How in the world did the artist carve that if he'd never seen the creature? The Wallamai pine is called a living fossil because it was only known from the fossil record, and it went extinct 150 million years ago, they said, until 1994 when it was found alive in a secluded valley west of Sydney, Australia. And when they compared the living Wallamai pine with the fossil, it was virtually identical. Well, there's a sign at a little exhibit in Australia, a replica, and at the bottom they said, the discovery of the Wallamai pine is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive on the earth. Well, why wouldn't it be equivalent to finding a really large dinosaur still alive on the earth? If we found one, and there have been some tantalizing testimonies. I talked to a missionary in Virginia a few years ago who had served for 30 years in Papua New Guinea, and he said that he met people, native Papua New Guineans, who described seeing creatures in the deep jungles, that when they described them, it sounded like they had seen a dinosaur. But that's just anecdotal. We don't know, and you couldn't take a photograph because you can fake anything on a computer. So if we find one, we're going to have to put him in an airplane, in the cargo hold, of course, and or if his leg is too big, just chop it off and send it to the most rabidly evolutionist university and say, could you please identify this for us? And if it's a dinosaur, the evolutionists are going to have to scramble to reconstruct their theory. But it won't be any surprise to creationists. Well, we live in a culture that says the Bible can't be trusted in this scientific age. Why do people say that? Well, it's because of cell phones and air conditioners and automobiles. No. It's because of the teaching of evolution in millions of years, and ape men and dating methods. And one of the ways that evolutionists have brainwashed the world is through books for children on dinosaurs and movies like Jurassic Park and natural history museums. And the world wants to know what the church is going to do about this. And all over the world, in every country I've been in, most of the church is saying, well, don't worry about the dinosaurs. Just trust in Jesus. It doesn't matter about the dinosaurs. But it does matter, because what the evolutionists say about dinosaurs is undermining the history in Genesis, which is the foundation of the gospel. It's undermining the credibility, the truthfulness, the reliability of the Bible. That's why we can't ignore it. And so we've got a lot of resources on dinosaurs. This lecture by Ken Ham for teens and adults, a lecture, or a very interactive DVD for 3 to 10-year-olds. And, and then we have the answers books that answer the 130 most asked questions, including what about dinosaurs? We also have answers DVDs that have a 5 to 7 minute answer on dinosaurs. And then in our answers for kids, one of those is about dinosaurs and the flood. We also have a book on dinosaurs for kids of all ages, a book on dragons and dragon legends and how that relates to dinosaurs, and a book for preschoolers. So there's really no excuse for us to not have good answers for our children at every age level. Any book or DVD out there, except for a couple, you can combine those together and save a lot of money that way. So encourage you to check that out. We have a lot of articles on our website, some of them about dinosaurs, evidence, and claims. And at our Creation Museum, we've got a dinosaur den with lots of life-size sculpted dinosaurs by our expert sculptor, Buddy Davis. We have amazing dinosaur fossils, including Ebenezer the Allosaur, which is a 97% of the skull and 50% of the skeleton. It's been valued at over $1 million, professionally prepared. We are doing CT scans on the brain, the skull, and to do research. And it's considered one of the 6 best Allosaurus fossils in the world. And then at the Ark Encounter, we have a couple of dinosaurs in cages just to show you they were on the Ark. And so we like to say that dinosaurs are our missionary lizards. They help us explain the gospel. The reason that they're dinosaurs in the fossil record is because they're dead, and death is because of sin, and Jesus came into the world to solve the problem of sin. So we use the dinosaurs to explain the Bible. There was no death before the fall. They lived thousands of years ago, not millions. They were created on the 6th day with man. They were all originally vegetarian, and the fossils are from Noah's flood. So we need to build all of our thinking, including about dinosaurs, on God's word, because it's the truth about history. So we'll look at more of that this in the worship service, and then I encourage you to come back. We'll get into more of the science tonight and tomorrow night. And if you understood anything that I've said or everything that I said, you will understand all those other lectures. Pastor? Okay. Father, thank you for this church. Thank you for its faithful teaching of the Word of God. And thank you for the truth of your Word. That's true from the very first verse. In Jesus' name, amen.